The whispers followed Clara Wilson wherever she went in Coolidge. Arizona hushed voices that fell silent when she turned her head, pitying glances that burned like the desert sun. It was 1876, and at 28 years of age with no children to show for her 6 years of marriage to a husband now buried beneath the parched earth, Clara had become something of a cautionary tale in a land where family lines meant survival. The dry October wind swept dust across the weathered porch as Clara hung laundry, her slender fingers working methodically despite the ache that had taken up permanent residence in her heart. 3 dresses, 2 shirts, a pair of worn trousers, all just for her. No tiny garments to wash, no little hands to hold. The silence of her small homestead was a companion she had grown accustomed to, though never fond of. "Good morning, Mrs. Wilson." The voice startled her, and Clara turned to find Mrs. Abernathy and her daughter passing by, the older woman's face a practiced mask of pleasantness that didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning," Clara replied, offering a smile that felt as brittle as sun-bleached bone. "Such a shame, tending to that whole place all by yourself, Mrs. Abernathy remarked, her gaze sweeping across the modest but well-kept homestead. "My Thomas says it's hardly proper for a woman alone. If only the good Lord had blessed you with children before taking Henry, at least you'd have had something of him to keep." The words, spoken with feigned sympathy, struck with precision. Clara's hand stilled on the damp fabric. "I manage just fine, thank you," she replied, her voice even despite the familiar wound being prodded open. As they walked away, Clara could hear Mrs. Abernathy's lowered voice. "Barren as the desert, poor thing. What use is a woman who can't give a man sons?" Clara's shoulders stiffened, but she continued hanging the laundry, each movement deliberate and controlled. She had heard it all before. Barren, empty, hollow. Words that defined her in the eyes of Coolidge, but could never capture the depth of her longing or the strength it took to rise each morning. 3 weeks later, Clara stood behind her market stall, arranging her preserves and baked goods with care. The Saturday market was bustling, and though many passed her by with only polite nods, her wares were good enough that business remained steady. "My, these peach preserves look divine," said Mrs. Hollister, the banker's wife, examining a jar. "Though I'm surprised you find the time for such things, without little ones underfoot. I can barely manage my kitchen with my 4 demanding my attention every minute." Clara's smile didn't falter. "I suppose we all find ways to fill our days, Mrs. Hollister." "Indeed. Though nothing fills them quite like children." The woman placed the jar down without purchasing it. "Such a blessing, family. I'll just see what Mrs. Thompson has brought today." Clara watched her go, the familiar sting of rejection burning behind her eyes but never reaching the surface. 6 years of such comments had taught her to build walls around her heart, though they grew more fragile with each passing season. "Pardon me, madam." A deep voice drew her attention. "I hear your apple butter's the finest in the territory." Before her stood a man she didn't recognize, tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of the sky after a summer storm. His clothes were dusty from travel, but well-made, and the way he carried himself spoke of confidence tempered with gentleness. "You heard correctly, sir," Clara replied, finding her voice after a moment of unexpected fluster. "Though I wonder who could have told you, as you appear new to Coolidge." A smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Finn Xavier, madam, just arrived from Colorado." The stage-coach driver was mighty talkative about local treasures. He tipped his hat. Seems he wasn't exaggerating. Clara felt a warmth rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. "Clara Wilson," she offered, extending her hand. "And I assure you, Mr. Xavier, my apple butter lives up to its reputation." "I'll take 2 jars then," he said, his gaze never leaving her face. "And perhaps you could point me toward lodging. I'm looking to settle in these parts." As Clara wrapped his purchases and provided directions to the boarding house, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long while: the simple pleasure of conversation unburdened by pity or expectation. It was refreshing, like the first rain after months of drought. "Thank you kindly, Mrs. Wilson," Finn said, accepting the package. "I expect I'll be seeing you around town." "It's a small place, Mr. Xavier. You're bound to see everyone eventually," Clara replied, surprised at the ease she felt in his presence. "Some folks, I suspect, are worth looking for specifically." With another tip of his hat, he was gone, leaving Clara with an unfamiliar fluttering in her chest and the first genuine smile to cross her lips in longer than she cared to remember. Over the following weeks, Clara found herself crossing paths with Finn Xavier with curious frequency. He'd appear at her market stall, inquiring about new preserves. She'd encounter him at the general store, where he'd help her reach the highest shelves without being asked. They'd exchange pleasantries outside the church on Sundays, his smile warm enough to make her forget, momentarily, the whispers that followed her down the aisle. Finn, she learned, had come to Arizona to establish a horse ranch. He had experience from his time in Colorado and had purchased land just beyond the edge of town, close enough to Clara's homestead that taking the same road to town became a natural occurrence. "Mrs. Wilson," he called one crisp November morning, slowing his horse as she walked toward town with a basket of goods for market. "Would you allow me to offer you a ride? Seems a shame for you to walk while I'm heading the same direction." Clara hesitated only briefly before accepting. As he helped her onto the horse, his hands steady and respectful at her waist, she caught a hint of his scent leather, sun-warmed skin, and something distinctly his own that made her heart quicken. "I heard you've started work on your ranch," Clara said as they rode, conscious of his presence behind her, his arms reaching around to hold the reins. "Indeed. The land's good, better than I hoped. With proper care, it'll support a fine herd." His voice was close to her ear, making it difficult to focus on his words rather than the rumble of his chest against her back. "And how are things at your homestead?" "Well enough. The roof needs patching before winter rains, but otherwise it stands strong." Finn was quiet for a moment. "I could help with that roof if you'd permit it. I'm handy with such repairs." Clara stiffened slightly. "I wouldn't want to impose. I've managed on my own these past 2 years." "No doubt you have," Finn said, his tone free of the condescension she'd grown to expect from offers of help. "But even the strongest among us can benefit from an extra pair of hands now and then. No imposition, just neighbors helping neighbors." Something in his words, the simple acknowledgement of her strength rather than her lack, loosened the knot of pride in Clara's chest. "Thank you, Mr. Xavier. I'd be grateful for the assistance." 2 days later, Finn arrived at Clara's homestead with tools and materials loaded in a wagon. He worked efficiently, patching the roof while Clara tended to her daily tasks, acutely aware of his presence above her. When she brought him water at midday, their fingers brushed, and the contact sent a jolt through her that she tried desperately to ignore. "You've kept this place in fine condition," Finn remarked as they sat on her porch, taking a brief rest. "Many would have struggled after losing a spouse." Clara's hands twisted in her lap. "Henry was a good man, but he taught me to be self-sufficient, said a woman should know how to manage, especially out here." "Wise man," Finn nodded, his eyes scanning the neat homestead. "Though I imagine it gets lonely." The unexpected perception in his statement caught Clara off guard. "It does," she admitted quietly, "though I've grown accustomed to it." "Growing accustomed to loneliness doesn't mean you deserve it," Finn said, his gaze meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Before she could respond, he stood. "I should finish before the light goes. That western corner still needs attention." As he climbed back onto the roof, Clara remained seated, his words echoing in her mind. Deserve? What did she deserve? According to most in Coolidge, a woman who couldn't fulfill her primary purpose deserved exactly what she had: an empty home and pitying glances. But for the first time in years, Clara allowed herself to wonder if perhaps they were wrong. Winter settled over Coolidge with unusual ferocity that year. December brought freezing temperatures that had the townsfolk huddled close to their fires, venturing out only when necessary. Clara maintained her routine as best she could, tending to her chickens and goats, preserving the last of her fall harvest, and making the occasional trip to town for supplies. It was on one such trip, with snow threatening and the sky a menacing gray, that disaster struck. The wheel of her small cart caught in a rut, snapping the axle clean through. Clara found herself stranded 3 miles from town, with the temperature dropping rapidly and no shelter in sight. She had just decided to abandon the cart and walk when the sound of hoofbeats reached her ears. Through the swirling snowflakes, Finn Xavier appeared like an answer to a prayer she hadn't dared to speak. "Mrs. Wilson." He dismounted quickly, concern etched on his features as he took in her situation. "Are you hurt?" "No, just stranded," Clara replied, unable to keep the relief from her voice. "The axle broke." Finn examined the damage, then shook his head. "No fixing this here. Storm's coming in fast. We need to get you somewhere warm." He looked up at the darkening sky. "My ranch is closest. I insist you shelter there until this passes." Under normal circumstances, Clara might have protested. A woman alone at a bachelor's home would set tongues wagging faster than a prairie fire. But with the first heavy snowflakes beginning to fall and the wind cutting through her coat, propriety seemed less important than survival. "Thank you, Mr. Xavier," she said, allowing him to help her onto his horse. The ride to Finn's ranch was tense, both from the deteriorating weather and the awareness of their proximity. When they finally arrived, the snow was falling in earnest, and Clara's fingers were numb despite the gloves she wore. Finn's home was modest but sturdy, a main cabin with a separate stable for his growing collection of horses. Inside, a fire burned in the hearth, and the space was neat and well organized, reflecting its owner's practical nature. "Please make yourself comfortable," Finn said, stoking the fire before helping her remove her snow-covered coat. "I'll prepare some coffee to warm you." As the storm howled outside, they sat before the fire, the strangeness of their situation giving way to comfortable conversation. Finn spoke of his life in Colorado, of his family back east, and of his dreams for his ranch. Clara found herself sharing stories of her childhood in Missouri, of her journey west with Henry, of the life they'd built and the future that had died with him. "He was ill for months before the end," Clara said quietly, watching the flames dance. "We wanted children desperately, but they never came. The doctor in Phoenix said there was something wrong with me, that I would never bear children." She hadn't meant to reveal such a private sorrow, but something about the snowbound intimacy of the moment, and the way Finn listened without judgment, loosened her tongue. "The women in town, they whisper. They call me Barren," Clara's voice caught, "as if that's all I am, a failed vessel." Finn's expression darkened. "People can be cruel when they don't understand another's pain." "It's not just cruelty," Clara said. "In their eyes, I've failed at the one thing a woman is meant to do, and perhaps they're right." "No." The vehemence in Finn's voice startled her. "They're not right, Clara. You are so much more than your ability to bear children. I've seen your strength, your kindness, your determination. Those gossiping women could learn more from you about true womanhood than you could ever learn from them." The use of her given name slipped out in his passion, hung in the air between them. Clara found she couldn't look away from his face, from the sincerity written there. "You shouldn't say such things," she whispered. "Why not? Because they're improper or because they're true?" The question remained unanswered as a particularly fierce gust of wind rattled the windows, drawing their attention to the worsening storm. "It seems you may be stuck here for the night," Finn said, his tone carefully neutral. "You can take my bed. I'll sleep by the fire." "I couldn't possibly." "I insist," Finn said firmly. "My mother would haunt me from the grave if I allowed a lady to sleep on the floor while I took the bed." The blizzard raged for 2 days, keeping Clara and Finn confined to the small cabin. They established a routine of careful politeness, with Clara insisting on cooking meals as thanks for his hospitality, and Finn maintaining a respectful distance despite the close quarters. On the morning of the 3rd day, they awoke to sunshine and a world transformed by snow. Finn hitched his strongest horses to a sleigh and drove Clara home, the journey made in companionable silence, both aware that something had shifted between them during their forced seclusion. As they approached her homestead, Clara's heart sank at the sight of her neighbor, Mrs. Thurman, watching from her porch. The woman's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline at the sight of Clara returning home with Finn after a 2-day absence. "I fear I've compromised your reputation," Finn said quietly, following her gaze. Clara surprised herself with a small laugh. "Mr. Xavier, my reputation in this town was decided long ago. I doubt this will significantly worsen it." Finn helped her down from the sleigh, his hands lingering at her waist. "I would never wish to cause you additional hardship, Mrs. Wilson." "Clara," she corrected softly. "After sharing your home for 2 days, I think you've earned the right to use my given name." A smile warmed his features. "Clara then, and I'm Finn to you." He hesitated, then added, "May I call on you properly once the roads are clear?" The question, so formal and yet so charged with meaning, made Clara's breath catch. She found herself nodding before she could consider all the reasons she should refuse. "Yes, you may." In the weeks that followed, Coolidge buzzed with fresh gossip. Clara Wilson, the Barren widow, was being courted by the handsome newcomer, Finn Xavier. What could he possibly see in her? Didn't he know she couldn't give him children? Surely a man building a ranch would want sons to inherit it. The whispers reached Clara's ears. Of course Coolidge was too small for them not to. But for the first time, she found their sting lessened by the joy that was blossoming in her heart. Finn called on her regularly, bringing small gifts, a book of poetry, wildflowers he'd gathered, a handcrafted wooden box for her sewing notions. They took walks along the creek that bordered her property, rode into town together for Sunday services, and shared meals on her porch as the spring evenings grew longer. "You know what they say about me," Clara said one evening in April as they watched the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson, "that I can't give you children." Finn's hand found hers, his touch warm and steady. "I know what they say. I also know it doesn't matter to me." Clara turned to him, searching his face for any sign of deception or compromise. "How can it not matter? Most men want sons. I want you," Finn interrupted gently. "Children would be a blessing, yes, but you, Clara Wilson, are the blessing I never expected to find when I came to Coolidge. If it's just the 2 of us until we're old and gray, that would be enough, more than enough." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. "You can't possibly mean that." "I have never meant anything more," Finn said, his voice low and certain. "I love you, Clara. Not for what you might give me, but for who you are." The words, so long yearned for and yet never expected, broke something open inside Clara. The tears fell freely now, years of pent-up sorrow and newfound hope mingling on her cheeks. "I love you too," she whispered, the admission both terrifying and liberating. Finn gathered her close, his embrace a shelter more secure than any roof he had repaired. When he kissed her, it was with a tenderness that spoke of devotion rather than mere desire, and Clara felt herself begin to heal in ways she hadn't known she needed. They were married in June 1877, in a small ceremony at the church in Coolidge. There were some who attended out of genuine goodwill, and others who came simply to witness what they considered a curious match. Clara wore a dress of soft blue rather than white, a nod to reality rather than an adherence to expectations, and Finn looked at her as if she were the sun itself when she walked down the aisle toward him. "I promise to cherish you all the days of my life," he vowed, his voice steady and sure. "To stand beside you in joy and sorrow, in plenty and in want, in sickness and in health." "I promise to trust in your love," Clara replied, finding strength in his unwavering gaze. "To build a life of purpose and meaning with you come what may." They made their home at Finn's ranch, which was already showing signs of prosperity. The small herd he had started with was growing, and his reputation as a fair dealer and skilled horseman spread throughout the territory. Clara brought her homesteading skills to their partnership, establishing a vegetable garden, keeping chickens, and transforming the bachelor's cabin into a true home filled with warmth and comfort. In the evenings, they would sit on their porch, watching the desert sunset and planning for the future. Finn spoke of expanding the ranch, of breeding horses known for their strength and endurance. Clara shared ideas for selling her preserves beyond the local market, perhaps to establishments in Phoenix or Tucson. "We could build another room here," Finn said one night, gesturing toward the western side of the cabin. "Make this place grow along with our ambitions." Clara nodded, leaning against his shoulder. "It's a good plan. This winter, perhaps, when the ranch work slows." Life settled into a rhythm that brought Clara more contentment than she had dared to hope for. The whispers in town gradually shifted from outright pity to bemused acceptance, as it became clear that Finn Xavier was genuinely happy with his choice of bride. If there were still those who clucked their tongues about the barren woman who had somehow snared a husband, Clara found their opinions mattered less and less. It was nearly a year into their marriage when Clara first noticed the changes in her body. Subtle at first, a new sensitivity, a persistent fatigue, a queasiness in the mornings that she initially attributed to a passing illness. She said nothing to Finn, unwilling to kindle hope only to have it extinguished once again. But as weeks passed and her courses failed to appear, Clara allowed herself to wonder. Could it be possible? After all this time, after all the prayers and tears and eventual resignation, could her body have finally awakened to its purpose? She consulted with Mrs. Parker, an older woman who served as Coolidge's midwife and healer. The woman's examination was gentle, her questions direct but kind. "How long were you married to your first husband, child?" she asked, her weathered hands pressing carefully on Clara's abdomen. 6 years, Clara replied, her throat tight with anxiety. Mrs. Parker nodded thoughtfully. "And there was never any sign. Never. A doctor in Phoenix said I couldn't, that there was something wrong with me." The older woman made a dismissive sound. "Doctors. They think they know a woman's body better than she does." Her fingers pressed again, and a slow smile spread across her face. "Well, Mrs. Xavier, I believe that doctor was mistaken. You're with child about 3 months along, I'd say." Clara's world tilted and steadied in the space of a heartbeat. "You're certain?" "As certain as one can be without waiting for the child to announce itself with a cry," Mrs. Parker replied with a chuckle. "The signs are all there. You'll feel movement soon enough to convince yourself." Clara rode home in a daze, her mind whirling with disbelief, joy and no small amount of fear. What if something went wrong? What if her body, so long dormant, couldn't sustain this precious life? What if this was simply another cruel joke of fate? Finn found her sitting motionless on their porch when he returned from working with the horses. One look at her face had him rushing to her side, concern etched in his features. "Clara, what is it? Are you ill?" She looked up at him, this man who had loved her without condition or expectation, who had seen her worth when others saw only lack. "Finn," she whispered, taking his hand and placing it gently on her still flat stomach. "I'm with child." His expression transformed from worry to wonder in an instant. "Truly," he breathed, sinking to his knees before her. Clara nodded, tears filling her eyes. "Mrs. Parker confirmed it. I'm about 3 months along." Finn's eyes glistened as he gazed up at her with such reverence that Clara felt her fears begin to recede. This was real. This was happening. And whatever came next, they would face it together. "My brave, beautiful Clara," Finn murmured, leaning forward to press a gentle kiss to her belly. "Thank you for this gift." "I was told it would never happen," Clara said, her voice catching. "I still can't quite believe it's real." Finn rose to sit beside her, gathering her close. Perhaps it just needed the right time, the right place. His hand caressed her cheek. The right love. That night, as they lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, Finn's hand rested protectively over Clara's abdomen. "I meant what I said before, you know," he whispered against her hair. "That you were enough, just as you are. This child is a blessing beyond measure, but you have always been enough." Clara covered his hand with her own, the simple truth of his words washing over her like a benediction. "I know," she replied softly. "And that is why this miracle has happened, because you loved me for myself, not for what I might give you." As Clara's pregnancy progressed, the news spread through Coolidge with the speed of a summer wildfire. The reactions were varied, genuine congratulations from those who had always been kind, stunned disbelief from others, and thinly veiled skepticism from a few who wondered aloud if the child could truly be Finn's, given Clara's condition. "Pay them no mind," Finn said firmly when Clara reported hearing such whispers at the general store. "Their small minds cannot comprehend that life is full of mysteries and second chances." Clara tried to follow his advice, focusing instead on the joy of preparing for their child. She sewed tiny garments in the evenings while Finn read aloud from books they hoped would one day fill their child's imagination. They converted a corner of their bedroom into a nursery space, with Finn crafting a cradle from pine and Clara lining it with soft blankets. By the time summer's heat descended on Arizona once more, Clara's body had transformed completely. Her belly, round and firm, housed a child who seemed determined to make its presence known with frequent, vigorous movements. "Active little one," Finn remarked one evening as they sat on the porch, his hand feeling the kicks and rolls beneath Clara's skin. "Takes after its mother, I think." Clara laughed, the sound free and unrestrained in a way it hadn't been for years. "Or its father." "You're hardly one to sit still when there's work to be done." "Fair point," Finn conceded with a grin. "Either way, this child will have spirit." It was during these quiet moments that Clara allowed herself to fully embrace the reality of their impending parenthood. The fear of loss never completely disappeared. She had known too much disappointment to take anything for granted, but it was increasingly overshadowed by anticipation and a deep, abiding gratitude. One afternoon in late July, as the temperature soared toward unbearable, Clara rested in the relative coolness of their home while Finn tended to the horses. A knock at the door roused her from a light doze, and she opened it to find Mrs. Abernathy standing on her porch, a basket in hand. "Mrs. "Xavier," the woman greeted her, eyes dropping to Clara's prominent belly. "I brought some fresh baked goods. Thought you might appreciate them in your condition." Clara's surprise must have shown on her face, for Mrs. Abernathy continued hurriedly, "It's traditional, after all." The women of the community supporting an expectant mother. "Thank you," Clara said, accepting the basket. "Would you like to come in for some tea?" The invitation, offered more out of politeness than desire, seemed to catch Mrs. Abernathy off guard. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Just briefly. It's too hot to linger outdoors." As Clara prepared the tea, an awkward silence filled the kitchen. Mrs. Abernathy's gaze wandered over the neat, comfortable home, lingering on the cradle visible through the bedroom doorway. "You've done well for yourself," she finally said. "Mr. Xavier seems a good man." "The best," Clara agreed, setting cups on the table. Mrs. Abernathy fidgeted with her skirt. "I suppose I owe you an apology, Mrs. Xavier. There were things said, assumptions made." Clara sat down carefully across from her visitor. "You weren't alone in those assumptions, Mrs. Abernathy. I had come to believe them myself." "Still," the woman insisted, "it wasn't Christian behavior. My Thomas said as much when we heard your news. Said perhaps the good Lord works in ways we don't understand, and it's not our place to judge his timing." The admission, clearly difficult for the proud woman to make, softened something in Clara's heart. "Your husband is wise," she said gently, "and your apology is accepted." They spoke of practical matters, then the best remedies for swollen ankles, how to ease the discomfort of the final weeks, preparations for the birth. When Mrs. Abernathy left an hour later, Clara felt a weight lift that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Not forgiveness offered, but something more like reclamation. She was no longer an object of pity or scorn, but a woman on the verge of motherhood, worthy of inclusion in the circle of women who had walked this path before her. When Finn returned, she shared the encounter, her hand absently stroking her belly as the baby rolled within. "People can surprise you," Finn said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Sometimes for the worse, but sometimes for the better." "I think I've had my fill of the worse," Clara replied with a smile. "I'm ready for more of the better." As August approached, bringing with it the seasonal monsoons that briefly transformed the parched landscape, Clara's time drew near. Mrs. Parker visited regularly, pronouncing mother and child healthy and strong. Finn grew increasingly protective, reluctant to leave Clara alone for long periods despite her assurances that first babies rarely arrived with haste. "It's not just the birth I worry about," he confessed one night as they lay listening to thunder rolling across the desert. "It's missing any moment of this journey with you. We've waited so long, I want to witness every part of it." His words, so honest and vulnerable, made Clara love him all the more. "You won't miss what truly matters," she promised, guiding his hand to where their child pressed a foot or elbow against her taut skin. Their child decided to make its entrance into the world during one such thunderstorm, with rain lashing the windows and lightning illuminating the night sky in brilliant flashes. Clara's labor began at sunset, and Finn rode through the downpour to fetch Mrs. Parker, returning soaked to the skin but triumphant with the midwife in tow. The hours that followed tested Clara's endurance in ways she had never imagined. The pain came in waves that seemed impossible to withstand, yet somehow she did, drawing strength from Finn's steady presence and Mrs. Parker's calm guidance. "You're doing beautifully," the midwife encouraged as dawn approached and the storm began to abate. "Not much longer now." Finn never left Clara's side, wiping her brow, supporting her back, murmuring words of love and encouragement in her ear. When at last the final push brought their child into the world, The cry that filled the room was strong and indignant, a declaration of arrival that brought tears to both parents' eyes. "A son," Mrs. Parker announced, placing the squalling, red-faced infant on Clara's chest. "A fine, healthy boy." Clara gazed down at the tiny face, still scrunched in protest at his abrupt change of circumstances, and felt a love so overwhelming it seemed to expand beyond the confines of her body. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Finn's hand trembled as he reached out to touch his son's damp hair. "He's perfect," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like his mother." They named him Samuel Henry Xavier, Samuel for Finn's father, Henry for Clara's first husband who had dreamed of children they never had. As news of the birth spread through Coolidge, visitors began to arrive, bearing gifts and genuine congratulations. Even those who had once whispered behind Clara's back seemed touched by the fulfillment of a dream so long deferred. Mrs. Thurman, who had watched so disapprovingly when Clara returned from the blizzard in Finn's sleigh, brought a handmade quilt of extraordinary beauty. "Every child should have something made just for them," she said, her usually stern face softening as she gazed at the infant. "A welcome to the world." In the quiet moments between visitors, Clara and Finn marveled at their son, his tiny, perfect fingers, the surprising strength of his grip, the way his eyes, still dark blue, seemed to study their faces with solemn concentration. "You think he knows how long we waited for him?" Clara asked as she nursed him one evening, the sunset gilding their home in golden light. Finn, seated beside her, his arm a warm presence around her shoulders, considered the question. "I think he knows he's loved," he said finally. "And in the end, that's what matters most." As summer gave way to fall and fall to winter, Samuel thrived. He grew plump and strong, his hair a dark gold that caught the light, his eyes gradually shifting to match his father's clear blue. His nature was sunny, but determined. He rarely cried without cause, but made his needs known with unmistakable clarity. Clara found motherhood both more challenging and more rewarding than she had imagined. The sleepless nights and constant demands tested her endurance, but the joy of watching her son discover the world, his first smile, his first laugh, his fascination with the play of light through the window made every difficulty worthwhile. Finn proved to be a devoted father, as attentive and gentle with Samuel as he was with his prized horses. He would carry the baby in a sling across his chest while doing light chores around the ranch, pointing out animals and plants, speaking to his son as if he understood every word. "Never too early to learn about the land," he explained when Clara commented on the practice. "Besides, he seems to enjoy the motion, calms him right down when he's fussy." It was true. Samuel was happiest when in motion, whether being rocked in his cradle, carried in his father's arms, or taken for gentle rides on one of the more docile mares. "A born horseman," Finn declared proudly the first time Samuel's face lit up with delight at being placed on a saddle in front of his father. As Samuel approached his first birthday, Clara made a discovery that left her speechless with wonder. Her monthly courses, which had returned some months after the birth, had once again ceased. Familiar symptoms, the morning sickness, the tender breasts, the bone-deep fatigue, confirmed what seemed almost too miraculous to believe. She was expecting another child. When she told Finn, his reaction was one of pure joy. He lifted her off her feet in an embrace that left her breathless, then set her down gently with an apology for his exuberance. "Are you happy?" he asked, searching her face. "I know Samuel is still so young." Clara nodded, her hands cradling the barely there curve of her stomach. "I never dared dream of one child, let alone two. It feels like more blessing than I deserve." Finn's expression grew serious. "You deserve every happiness, Clara. Never doubt that. The second pregnancy proved easier than the first in some ways. Clara knew what to expect, had confidence in her body's abilities, and more challenging in others, as she now had an active toddler demanding her attention. Samuel took his first steps as Clara entered her second trimester, and seemed determined to explore every inch of their home and yard at top speed. "I swear he's trying to give me gray hairs before this new one arrives," Clara laughed as Finn rescued their son from his latest attempt to climb onto the porch railing. "He's adventurous," Finn replied, swinging the giggling boy into his arms. "Like his mother who braved a blizzard and scandal to find happiness." Clara raised an eyebrow. "As I recall, you were the one who found me stranded in that blizzard." "Details," Finn dismissed with a wink. "The point is, our children come by their spirit honestly. Children." The plural still sent a thrill through Clara's heart. From barren widow to mother of two in less than 3 years, a transformation so complete, it sometimes felt like a dream from which she feared waking. Their daughter arrived in the gentle warmth of early spring, with far less drama than her brother had mustered. The labor was shorter, the delivery smoother, and when Mrs. Parker placed the infant in Clara's arms, the little girl regarded her parents with an expression of such serene contemplation that both laughed in delight. "She looks wise already," Finn said, his finger caught in his daughter's surprisingly strong grip. "Like she's been waiting to meet us and has important things to tell us." "Well, she'll have to wait until she learns to talk," Clara replied, admiring the soft dark hair that already curled around the baby's delicate ears. "What shall we call her?" They settled on Elizabeth Grace Elizabeth for Clara's mother, and Grace for the blessing they considered her to be. Samuel, not quite 2, regarded his sister with a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty, patting her head with careful hands under his parents' watchful eyes. "Gentle," Clara reminded him. "She's very new." "Baby," Samuel said solemnly, one of the few words in his growing vocabulary. "My baby." "That's right," Finn agreed, lifting his son to get a better view. "Your sister. You'll help look after her, won't you?" Samuel nodded with the absolute conviction of toddlerhood, and Clara's heart expanded with love for her small, perfect family, a family she had once believed impossible. Life on the Xavier Ranch settled into a new rhythm with 2 children. The days were fuller, the challenges more numerous, but the joy multiplied rather than divided. Finn's business prospered, his horses gaining reputation throughout the territory for their quality and training. Clara found time, between caring for the children and maintaining their home, to revive her preserve-making business, with Finn building her a small workroom attached to the kitchen where she could prepare her goods for market. In town, Clara was no longer the subject of pitying whispers. Instead, she found herself included in the circle of mothers who exchanged advice, commiserated over sleepless nights, and celebrated their children's milestones. The transformation wasn't lost on her, how the very women who had once defined her by her lack now welcomed her as one of their own. "It's as if they've forgotten how cruel they once were," she remarked to Finn after a particularly pleasant afternoon at a quilting circle where her children had been admired and fussed over. "People have short memories for their own unkindness," Finn replied. "But I'm glad for it, if it brings you peace." Clara considered this as she stitched a patch onto Samuel's constantly torn trousers. "Not peace exactly. I haven't forgotten, but I've found something better than bitterness to fill my heart." Finn's smile was tender as he watched their children Samuel, helping to rock Elizabeth's cradle with more enthusiasm than skill. "So have I," he said quietly. As the years passed, the Xavier family continued to grow and thrive. A third child, another boy they named James, joined them when Samuel was 5 and Elizabeth 3. The ranch expanded along with their family, with Finn adding rooms to their home and acreage to their land as their prosperity increased. Clara, once pitied for her emptiness, found herself surrounded by fullness, the chaos and laughter of children, the steady love of her husband, the respect of a community that had once judged her lacking. The whispers that had once followed her like shadows were replaced by calls of greeting, invitations to social gatherings, requests for her advice on matters ranging from childcare to preserve making. On a warm evening in the summer of 1885, as Clara sat on their expanded porch watching their children play in the yard, Samuel, now 8, teaching 7-year-old Elizabeth to twirl a lasso while 4-year-old James toddled after them in determined imitation, she felt a presence beside her. Finn settled into the chair next to hers, his hand automatically reaching for hers as it had countless times over their years together. "Happy?" he asked, a question that had become something of a tradition between them. "Completely," Clara replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. "You?" "Beyond words." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if my wheel hadn't caught in that rut on the road to Coolidge, if you hadn't been at the market that day?" Clara considered the question. "Sometimes. But then I look at our children, our home, what we've built together, and I can't imagine any other path. All the sorrow, all the waiting, it led to this moment to us. I wouldn't change a day of it." Finn lifted their joined hands to his lips. "Nor would I. Though I wish I could have spared you the pain of those years before. Without them, I might not have recognized the gift when it arrived," Clara said softly. "Everything has its season, its purpose." They sat in companionable silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon in a blaze of orange and gold. Samuel had abandoned his lasso lessons and was now giving Elizabeth a piggyback ride around the yard, both laughing breathlessly while James chased after them, demanding his turn. "Ma, Pa." "Watch me," Samuel called, spinning in circles until Elizabeth squealed with delight and James clapped his hands in excitement. Clara and Finn waved, their faces mirroring the joy of their children. This was the life they had built together, not without challenges or sorrows, but rich with love, purpose, and the daily miracles of family. Later that night, with the children finally asleep and the house quiet under the silver light of a desert moon, Clara and Finn lay together in the peace of their bedroom. Finn's hand rested on Clara's abdomen, a habit formed during her first pregnancy that had never quite faded. "I've been thinking," Clara said, her voice soft in the darkness. "Perhaps we should consider adding on to the house again. Another bedroom might be needed before too long." Finn raised himself on one elbow, looking down at her with sudden intensity. "Clara, are you saying," she smiled, covering his hand with her own. "Mrs. Parker confirmed it yesterday. I wanted to be sure before I told you." Joy spread across Finn's features, as bright and unrestrained as it had been with each previous announcement. "A fourth," he whispered, leaning down to press a reverent kiss to her still flat stomach. "My amazing Clara." "It seems the good Lord wasn't finished surprising us," Clara said, running her fingers through his hair. Finn kissed her belly once more, then looked up with such tenderness that Clara felt tears prick behind her eyes. "Soon," he whispered against her skin, a promise and a prayer in one word. "Soon our family will grow again." Clara pulled him up to kiss him properly, her heart so full she thought it might burst. From barren to blessed, from whispers to wonder, her journey had been one of patience rewarded and faith restored. Not just in God or fate or the mysteries of her own body, but in the power of love to transform and heal, to create life where once there had been only emptiness. As Finn's arms encircled her, and the future stretched before them like the vast Arizona sky, limitless and bright with possibility. Clara knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true purpose, not merely in motherhood, precious though that gift had proven to be, but in building this life, this family, this love that grew and deepened with each passing year. The whispers had long since faded, replaced by the laughter of children and the steady rhythm of days filled with purpose. Clara Wilson Xavier, once defined by what she lacked, had become a woman known for the abundance she created in her home, in her community, and in the hearts of all who loved her. And as she drifted toward sleep in the embrace of the man who had seen her worth when others saw only emptiness, Clara sent a silent prayer of gratitude into the night for the unexpected paths that had led her here, to this moment of perfect contentment, to this fullness of heart that no whispered judgment could ever diminish.